The sun hung high in the sky, its sharp rays pressing down on the city streets like a heavy blanket. The afternoon was unusually hot, and the air seemed to shimmer as if the world itself had been set on fire. People hurried about, their faces glistening with sweat, their eyes fixed on their destinations. It was one of those days when no one had time to notice much beyond themselves. Maria walked slowly out of the crowded bus station, her steps uneven, her body heavy with exhaustion. In her arms, pressed close to her chest, lay her newborn baby, wrapped in a thin, faded cloth. The baby was only weeks old, a tiny fragile thing whose breath rose and fell in soft, uncertain patterns. Every time the little one stirred, Maria's tired arms tightened protectively, holding her child close, as though shielding her from the unforgiving world outside. The bus ride had been long and suffocating. The seats were packed with restless passengers, the air thick with heat and impatience. Maria had stood for most of the journey, her baby cradled in her arms, her legs trembling beneath her. No one had offered her a seat, though many had noticed her fragile state. She didn't complain. She never did. She just kept whispering gentle words to her baby, rocking her slightly to keep her calm, even as her own strength drained away. By the time the bus pulled into the terminal, Maria felt as though she were walking on air, not the light, floating kind of air, but the dizzy, unsteady kind that made the ground seem unreliable. Her stomach growled painfully. She had eaten only a piece of bread that morning, saving whatever else she had for her baby. Her lips were dry, cracked from thirst, and her hands shook as she clutched her child closer. The station itself was a storm of noise and movement. People shouted directions, vendors called out for customers, and the squeal of brakes and engines echoed through the open-air space. Maria blinked rapidly, trying to steady her vision as the world swayed around her. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper, and Maria kissed her tiny forehead, murmuring, "It's all right, little one. Mama's here." But even as she spoke, her legs buckled beneath her. A sudden wave of weakness swept over her body. Her arms tightened reflexively around her child as her knees gave way. She tried to stay upright, to find something to lean on, but her strength was gone. In a slow, helpless motion, she collapsed onto the sun-baked pavement just outside the station. The hard ground met her body with a thud, jarring her bones, but she clung to the baby with all the strength she had left. Her arms acted as a shield, cradling the child so that no harm would come. The baby let out a loud, piercing cry, the sound slicing through the noise of the busy station. For a moment, time seemed to pause. Maria lay there, her chest rising and falling in shallow, shaky breaths, her hair falling loosely across her face. She could hear her baby's cries but felt powerless to move, as though her body no longer belonged to her. The heat of the pavement burned against her skin, but she barely noticed. All she could think was, "Please, let my baby be safe." Around her, people walked by. A man carrying a briefcase glanced at her, then quickly looked away. A young couple slowed their steps for a moment, curiosity flickering in their eyes, but they whispered to each other and kept going. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing loudly, their voices drowning out the baby's cries. No one stopped. Maria's eyes fluttered, half open, half closed. She tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came from her dry lips. Her throat ached, her chest felt heavy, and a deep sense of helplessness wrapped itself around her. She wanted to shout, to beg for anyone to help her, but the words never formed. The baby's cries grew louder, more desperate. The sound cut through the air, but it only seemed to make people walk faster, eager to avoid being pulled into someone else's struggle. Maria could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her, not just the heat of the sun, but the coldness of indifference from the people around her. Her mind raced through memories. She thought of the day her daughter was born, the tiny fingers curling around her own, the first weak cry that had made her cry too, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming love that filled her heart. She thought of the promises she had whispered then, that she would protect this little life, no matter the cost. Yet now, lying on the ground, her strength gone, she wondered if she was failing. The sounds of the city continued around her, uncaring. The rumble of buses, the shuffle of footsteps, the hum of 1,000 conversations. All of it blurred into one endless noise, far away from the quiet battle Maria was fighting with herself to stay conscious, to keep holding on, to not let go. Her vision blurred further. Shapes moved past her, shadows against the brightness of the pavement. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a hand reaching toward her, but it disappeared as quickly as it had come. She realized then how invisible she must have looked to everyone else, a tired young mother, lying in the middle of the crowd, seen but ignored. Still, her arms held firm around her baby. Even as her body weakened, she found strength in that one act. If she could not rise, she could at least keep her child safe. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest, but her will remained stubborn. As long as I breathe, no harm will touch her. The baby's cry softened for a moment, as though sensing her mother's struggle, then returned louder, sharper, a plea in its purest form. Maria turned her face toward her child, whispering words no one else could hear. Words of love, words of apology, words of promise. Minutes passed, though to Maria they felt like hours. The pavement beneath her seemed to stretch endlessly, the sun above merciless in its glare. The crowd flowed like a river, and she was just a stone in its path, unmoving, unnoticed. Every passing moment deepened the ache in her body, but even deeper was the ache in her spirit that not one soul had paused to care. And yet, in the middle of despair, Maria held on to a quiet hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, someone would see, not just glance, but truly see her. Someone would step out of the rushing crowd, reach down, and remind her that she wasn't as invisible as she felt. For now, she lay there, the world spinning around her, clutching her newborn as if the child were her only anchor to life itself. The baby's cry echoed sharply through the air, rising above the noise of buses and footsteps. It was the kind of sound that usually turned heads quickly, a newborn's desperate wail, so small yet so piercing that it could stir anyone's heart. Yet, at that moment, in the middle of the station's busy crowd, the cry seemed to melt into the background, as if people had learned to ignore even the most human of sounds. Maria's body lay still against the rough pavement, her breathing shallow, her arms locked around her baby like an unbreakable chain. She wanted to lift her head, to plead for help, but her strength had drained completely. Her lips parted once, twice, but only a dry whisper came out, so faint it was swallowed by the sounds of the street. A man in a grey suit walked past first. He had his phone pressed to his ear, his pace quick and impatient. He saw Maria out of the corner of his eye. He even slowed for a moment, his expression caught between curiosity and unease. But then he shook his head, muttered something into his phone, and hurried on. To him, she was just a stranger, someone else's problem. Moments later, an older woman carrying 2 shopping bags paused. She noticed the young mother lying on the ground, the baby crying loudly, and her face softened for a second. She shifted her bags to one hand, as if considering whether to stop. But then her eyes flickered toward the bus she was about to miss. With a sigh, she adjusted the bags and continued walking, her footsteps quickening. Maria's heart sank, though she barely had the energy to think. She had always believed that people would help each other in moments of need, that kindness was something natural, something instinctive. Yet here she was, invisible in the middle of a crowd, her child's cries ignored. It wasn't that people didn't hear. They simply didn't want to get involved. A group of teenagers passed by, their laughter loud, carefree. One of them glanced at Maria, frowned slightly, then quickly turned back to his friends. They were joking about something, their words floating in the air, but not one of them slowed down. To them, Maria's struggle was just another scene in the city, no more important than the pigeons fluttering nearby or the vendors shouting their prices. Minutes crawled by. Maria's body ached from lying against the hard ground, but she held her baby close, rocking gently despite her weakness. She whispered broken words into the soft cloth wrapped around the child, trying to soothe her. "It's all right, little one. Don't cry. Mama's here. Mama's here," but her voice was faint, and the baby only cried louder, as if sensing the heaviness in her mother's spirit. More people passed, men, women, even children holding their parents' hands. Some looked directly at Maria and then quickly looked away, their eyes filled with unease. Others didn't even glance at her, too absorbed in their own hurried lives. Each pair of footsteps fading away felt like a small rejection, a reminder that she was utterly alone in that moment. Inside her mind, Maria drifted back to memories of home. She remembered her village, where neighbors knew each other by name, where no one ever turned away when someone stumbled. If a child cried there, 10 arms would reach out to help. If a mother fell, someone would always lift her up. She thought of those days with longing, wondering how the world could feel so different here, in this vast city where people brushed past one another without even a word. Her throat tightened as she thought, what if no one helps? What if we just stay here, and the world keeps moving around us? Her body trembled, though whether from weakness or fear, she could not tell. She pressed her cheek against her baby's tiny head, taking in the warmth of that small life. It was the only thing keeping her from giving in to despair. She couldn't think about herself, not now. Every heartbeat, every ounce of strength, was for the child in her arms. The minutes stretched longer. Her surroundings blurred, her eyelids growing heavier, but she could still feel the presence of people rushing by, footsteps echoing, voices overlapping. It was strange, so much life moved around her, yet none of it touched her. She was like a stone in the middle of a stream, the water flowing past without pause. A young man carrying a backpack slowed down for a moment, his brow furrowing. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone, perhaps thinking of calling someone. But then he hesitated. His thumb hovered over the screen before he shoved the phone back into his pocket and walked away. Maria watched through half-open eyes, her heart sinking further. Why was it so hard for someone to stop? The baby's cries pierced again, sharp and pleading. A few people glanced around, annoyance flickering in their expressions as though the sound were simply an inconvenience. Maria's heart broke at that thought that her child's cry, so full of need, could be treated as nothing more than noise. Her vision dimmed for a moment, her head dipping forward before she forced herself to stay awake. She couldn't give up. Not while her baby needed her. With trembling lips, she whispered again, "Stay with me, little one. Just a little longer. Someone will help. They must." But deep inside, doubt pressed against her chest like a weight. She wondered if the city had hardened people's hearts, if everyone had grown so used to rushing that they no longer knew how to stop. She thought of her late husband then, how he used to tell her, "No matter what, there's always someone out there who cares. You just have to hold on long enough for them to find you." His voice echoed in her memory, a soft reminder of faith. She clung to those words now, even as her body begged her to surrender. The silence of strangers was louder than any noise. It was not the kind of silence that came from peace, but the kind that came from absence, the absence of care, the absence of kindness. Maria felt that silence pressing against her from every direction, suffocating in its weight. And yet, within that silence, she kept whispering to her child. She kept rocking gently, kept holding on, even when her arms shook with fatigue. She would not let go. She could not. The crowd continued to flow, each person carrying their own burdens, their own destinations. To them, she was a momentary sight, easily forgotten once they turned the corner. To Maria, every second of being unseen was a lifetime of waiting. She lay there, her body fragile, her baby's cries echoing, surrounded by countless footsteps yet untouched by even a single hand. The world kept moving, but for Maria, time stood still. And in that endless stillness, she held on to the faintest flicker of hope that somewhere in the sea of strangers, there might still be one heart willing to stop, one soul willing to see. The baby's cries rose and fell like waves, each sound sharp enough to cut through the noise of the crowd, yet still ignored. Maria lay weak, her body heavy, her vision dim, her spirit trembling under the weight of despair. She felt herself slipping, as though the world was fading into a blur. And then just when she thought she would be swallowed completely by the silence of strangers, something changed. A pair of footsteps slowed beside her. Unlike the others, they did not pass quickly. They stopped. The shadow of a tall figure stretched across the ground, blocking the glare of the afternoon sun from her face. Maria tried to lift her eyes, struggling to focus. At first, all she could make out was the shine of polished shoes and the hem of a dark suit. Then came a voice. Calm. Deep. Steady. Are you all right? No one had asked her that all day. Not on the bus, not in the station, not even as she lay collapsed on the ground. For a moment, Maria wondered if she had imagined it. Her lips trembled as she tried to answer, but only a weak whisper escaped. Her throat was too dry, her strength too low. The man knelt down, bringing himself closer to her level. His face came into view, a kind yet unreadable expression, his eyes sharp but softened by something she could not name. He was dressed in a crisp suit, far too fine for the dusty pavement he knelt upon. People stared as they walked past, surprised that someone like him would even stop. He looked at the child in her arms first. The tiny baby, red-faced from crying, squirmed weakly against Maria's chest. His brows furrowed, and his hand reached forward not to take, not to push, but to steady the cloth that had slipped slightly around the infant. His touch was careful, almost hesitant, as though he understood the weight of what he was holding even with the smallest gesture. You need help, he said firmly, not as a question but as a truth. Maria blinked, her tears welling. Finally someone had seen her. Someone had noticed not just the noise, not just the scene, but her. Around them, the crowd began to buzz. People who had ignored her minutes before now slowed their pace, whispering to one another. The sight of the well-dressed stranger kneeling beside the collapsed mother drew curious eyes. A chauffeur in a neat uniform rushed from the nearby black car, his face alarmed. Sir, he called, do you want me to? The man raised his hand slightly, silencing him without words. His focus remained on Maria. He shifted closer, his strong arms reaching out. Let me help you, he said softly, though his voice carried authority that left no room for refusal. Maria hesitated for a moment. She had lived long enough to know that not every hand reaching out could be trusted. But something in his eyes, a quiet determination, a depth of understanding, gave her courage. With what little strength she had left, she loosened her grip just enough for him to slide one arm beneath her and the other around her child. The movement was gentle, deliberate. In one smooth motion, he lifted both mother and child from the scorching ground as though they weighed no more than feathers. For Maria, who had felt like a burden to the world moments ago, the gesture felt like a miracle. Gasps rippled through the bystanders. Some pulled out their phones to record the moment, while others simply watched in silence. The very same people who had walked past indifferently now seemed captivated by the sight of one man doing what none of them had done. The chauffeur hurried to open the back door of the sleek black car parked at the curb. Its surface gleamed under the sun, polished so well that it reflected the faces of the curious crowd. Without hesitation, the man carried Maria and her baby inside, lowering them carefully onto the leather seat. Inside, the air was cool, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat outside. Maria felt the chill sweep over her skin, but more than that, she felt a wave of relief. Her child, still crying, quieted slightly as if sensing the change. The man settled beside her, his expression unreadable yet focused. He reached into a small compartment, pulling out a bottle of water, unscrewing the cap, and offering it to her. Drink, he said simply. Maria's hands trembled as she accepted it. The first sip burned her dry throat, but soon the coolness spread through her body like life returning. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a faint, "Thank you." The man studied her quietly. He did not rush her, did not overwhelm her with questions. He simply sat there, his presence steady, his eyes thoughtful. Finally, he asked, "Do you have somewhere to go?" Maria lowered her gaze, her silence the only answer. Her heart was heavy, her future uncertain. She had no home waiting for her, no family in the city, no safety net to catch her if she fell again. She pressed her baby closer, hoping that holding her child tighter might somehow shield them both from the truth. The man did not press further. Instead, he gave a small nod, as if her silence told him everything he needed to know. Through the tinted glass, the city bustled on, unaware of the story unfolding inside the car. The people outside would never know what had led Maria to that moment, nor would they guess the man beside her carried a story of his own. To everyone else, he was just a wealthy stranger with a polished car and a life far removed from the struggles of an ordinary woman. But to Maria, in that fragile moment, he was more than that. He was the unexpected hand that had reached into her darkness, lifting her up when the rest of the world had walked past. For the first time that day, Maria felt a flicker of hope. She still didn't know who this man was or why he had chosen to help her, but as she looked down at her baby's tiny face, calmer now in her arms, she whispered silently to herself, "Maybe my child's cry was not ignored after all. Maybe it was heard by the one person who was meant to listen." And though she could not yet see the path ahead, one thing was certain: the moment that stranger lifted her from the pavement, her story had changed forever. The hum of the car was steady, almost soothing, as it moved away from the crowded station. Maria sat quietly, still holding her baby tightly against her chest. The newborn's cries had softened into soft hiccups, her tiny body finally resting in the comfort of her mother's arms. Maria stroked her daughter's cheek with trembling fingers, her heart beating fast, not from fear but from the strange, almost unreal turn her life had just taken. Beside her sat the man who had lifted her from the street. His posture was calm, his eyes fixed outside the window, but there was a sense of quiet strength about him. The polished suit, the silent chauffeur, the smooth car, it all felt like another world compared to the pavement she had collapsed on only minutes ago. Maria wondered silently, who was this man? Why had he stopped when so many others hadn't? And why was she now sitting inside his car, headed somewhere she did not know? The baby stirred softly. Maria kissed the little forehead and whispered, "We're safe. I think we're safe." The words were half a prayer, half a reassurance to herself. The journey seemed long, winding through streets she didn't recognize. Finally, the car slowed as tall gates came into view. They opened silently, and the vehicle moved forward into a wide driveway lined with trees. Maria blinked in disbelief. Before her stood a large mansion, its windows gleaming in the afternoon light, its gardens perfectly kept. It looked nothing like the world she had come from here, everything spoke of wealth, order, and comfort. The car stopped, and the chauffeur stepped out quickly to open the door. The man gestured for Maria to step out. She hesitated at first, her heart thumping nervously, but when she saw his steady expression, she slowly shifted, still clutching her baby. Her feet touched the smooth stone pathway, and for a moment she wobbled, still weak from exhaustion. The man immediately extended his hand, steadying her. His grip was firm, protective, but gentle. "You'll be all right," he said quietly, as though promising something more than just balance. Inside, the mansion was cool and serene. A wide hallway stretched before her, filled with soft light and quiet elegance. Yet it was not the gold frames or polished floors that struck Maria the most, it was the silence. Not the silence of strangers who turned away, but a peaceful silence that seemed to welcome her, to give her space to breathe. A woman in a neat uniform appeared quickly, bowing slightly to the man before turning to Maria with kind eyes. "Come," she said softly, "let me show you to a room." Maria followed her, each step cautious, her mind torn between gratitude and uncertainty. She was led to a small but comfortable room, a wide bed covered in fresh sheets, a chair by the window, a table with a jug of water and fruit. It was simple compared to the grand house, but to Maria, it felt like the most beautiful place she had seen in a long time. She lowered herself onto the bed, her arms still wrapped protectively around her baby. The woman brought her water and warm soup, urging her gently to eat. Maria hesitated, but, at the sight of her baby's calm face, she allowed herself a few slow sips. The warmth spread through her body, loosening the tight knot of hunger that had gripped her for days. As evening approached, the man returned. He stood by the doorway at first, as though not wishing to intrude. Maria looked up, unsure of what to say. Gratitude filled her, but so did a quiet fear. She whispered, I don't know why you helped me." His expression softened. He stepped closer, his voice low but clear. "Because once, long ago, I was the one lying on the ground. And someone lifted me up." Maria's eyes widened. She had not expected that answer. He sat in the chair by the window, his gaze distant as if he were looking into another time. "I wasn't born into this house. I wasn't born with these clothes, or this car, or this life. There was a time when I had nothing less than nothing. I was alone, hungry, and forgotten. And one day, just as you were today, I collapsed where everyone could see. No one helped, until one stranger did. That stranger gave me a chance to stand again. Everything you see now, this house, this life, it started with that moment." Maria listened, her heart beating faster. She had never imagined that someone so polished, so distant from her world, could have known suffering too. He turned his eyes to her, steady and unwavering. "That is why I stopped. Not because I am kind, not because I am noble. I stopped because I saw myself in you. And I remembered the hand that lifted me once. I could not walk away." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. She bowed her head, whispering, "Thank you. I have nothing to give you in return." He shook his head gently. "You've already given something. You've reminded me of where I came from. And that is worth more than anything." The room fell into a quiet stillness. Outside, the evening sky turned golden, the light spilling softly through the window. Maria looked down at her baby, who was now peacefully asleep in her arms. For the first time in a long time, she felt the heavy weight of fear lift, replaced by something unfamiliar yet comforting, hope. The man rose from his chair. "Rest. You and your child are safe here. Tomorrow, we will talk about what comes next." He left the room quietly, leaving Maria to her thoughts. She lay back on the bed, her baby cradled against her, her mind replaying his words. "Once, long ago, I was the one lying on the ground." The image of him kneeling on the pavement to lift her returned again and again. It was not just the act of kindness, it was the truth behind it. He understood what it meant to be unseen. He understood what it meant to be lifted at the last moment. As night fell, Maria closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she had a roof over her head, warmth in her body, and the comfort of knowing that kindness still existed. And though she had stepped into a stranger's house, it did not feel like a stranger's shelter anymore. It felt like a new beginning. The morning light slipped gently through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Maria stirred awake slowly, her baby still sleeping peacefully against her side. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The bed beneath her was too soft, the air too cool, the silence too calm to belong to the noisy station she had collapsed in the day before. Then, as her eyes fell on the neat table with water and fruit, the memories returned. She sat up slowly, her arms instinctively wrapping around her baby. A rush of emotion filled her chest, gratitude, relief, and disbelief all at once. She had survived another day. More than that, she had survived with help. A soft knock came at the door, and the same woman from yesterday entered with a tray of warm food. "Good morning," she said kindly. "Sir asked me to make sure you eat." Maria's lips parted, surprised. She looked down at the tray: bread, milk, and eggs. To anyone else, it might have seemed ordinary, but to Maria it felt like a feast. She whispered a soft thank you and ate slowly, careful not to wake her baby. With every bite, her strength returned, and with it came a sense of calm she hadn't known in months. Later that day, she was invited into a quiet study. The man was already there, seated at a large desk, a few papers in front of him. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Maria sat carefully, her baby in her arms, her eyes lowered. She felt out of place in the room filled with books and polished wood. Yet the man's gaze was steady, not judging, not impatient. He began gently. "You don't need to tell me everything if you don't wish to. But I would like to know, what do you need most right now?" Maria's lips trembled. She wanted to say many things: safety, food, a roof, a chance. But above all, she wanted dignity, a life where she could stand on her own and care for her child. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "I need work. I don't want to depend on others forever. I just need a chance." The man studied her for a moment, then nodded. "A chance? That is what was once given to me too." He explained that he owned businesses, that many people worked under his care. He could find her a role, something suited to her, something that would allow her to live with independence. "But until you are strong enough," he added, "you will stay here. You and your child. You need rest before you can rebuild." Maria felt tears sting her eyes again. She whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," he said simply. "Live your life well. That is thanks enough." The days that followed were like stepping into a new world. Maria was given a small room of her own, food to eat, and clothes for her baby. She spent her mornings helping in the kitchen, learning from the staff, and her afternoons caring for her child in peace. Each night, she looked out the window at the garden lights, her heart full of wonder at how quickly her life had shifted. But more than comfort, what she felt was hope. For the first time in a long time, the future did not look like a dark, endless road. It looked like something she could shape. The man, whose name she now knew as Mr. Gray, did not overwhelm her with questions or demands. He simply checked in from time to time, asking if she was well, if her baby was healthy. His kindness was quiet, steady, the kind that gave her space to breathe while reminding her she was not alone. Weeks passed, and Maria grew stronger. She gained back the weight she had lost, her cheeks filled with color, her eyes no longer dim with exhaustion. She learned new skills from the house staff, from cooking to organizing. Mr. Gray watched her progress quietly, and one day, he offered her a position in one of his shops, helping with daily tasks. It was modest work, but it came with fair pay and stability. Maria accepted with both hands, her heart filled with gratitude. It wasn't just a job, it was dignity, the ability to stand on her own feet again. With time, she and her baby moved into a small apartment arranged by Mr. Gray's help. It was nothing grand, just a single bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a window that overlooked a street lined with trees. But to Maria, it felt like a palace. It was hers. A place she could call home. She decorated it with small things: flowers in a jar, a blanket folded neatly at the end of the bed, a cradle for her child. Each day she woke with purpose, dressed for work, and returned home to her baby with stories and laughter. Slowly, the fear that had once haunted her steps began to fade. And through it all, she never forgot the day she had collapsed on the pavement, unseen by the crowd. She never forgot the silence of strangers. But most of all, she never forgot the unexpected hand that had lifted her up. Mr. Gray never asked for recognition. He never told anyone about what he had done. To the world, he remained the quiet, mysterious millionaire, seen only from a distance. But to Maria, he was more than that. He was proof that kindness could change the course of a life. Years later, when her baby had grown into a child running happily through their little apartment, Maria would often sit by the window at night and think back. She would smile softly, whispering, "We made it. We truly made it." She taught her daughter the value of compassion, reminding her again and again, "Never turn away from someone who needs you. Even the smallest hand can lift someone's world." Her daughter would listen wide-eyed, not yet fully understanding. But Maria knew that one day, she would. And somewhere, not too far away, Mr. Gray continued his quiet life, carrying his own memories of being lifted once long ago. Perhaps that was why he had never stopped, because he knew that the kindness given to him did not belong only to him. It was a gift to be passed on, from one life to another, like a flame that never burned out. Maria's life was no longer the same. It was not perfect. There were still struggles, still hard days, still challenges ahead. But now she faced them with strength instead of fear. She faced them with hope. Because she had learned one simple truth: even when the world turns away, even when silence surrounds you, compassion can arrive when you least expect it. And when it does, it can change everything. Her story, once filled with despair, had become a story of survival, of dignity restored, of love enduring. It was no longer just her story, it was a story to remind others too, that kindness matters, that one hand can lift a life forever. And so, with her child in her arms and the memory of that day engraved in her heart, Maria stepped forward into a future she had once thought impossible. A future made possible by a single moment, a single choice, a single man who stopped when no one else did. Her life, once broken, was forever changed.